Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
My boyfriend and I had been together for about 2 years, and his best friend had become like a brother to me. The three of us hung out constantly, especially since we all had unconventional schedules. That afternoon, we decided to hit up the big box store to pick up some stuff for my boyfriend's apartment. He was finally moving out of his parents' place and needed everything from kitchen supplies to basic furniture. His friend had the day off from his construction job and offered to help us haul everything back in his truck. We'd been shopping for about an hour, comparing prices on coffee makers and debating whether the expensive blender was worth it. Our cart was getting pretty full with random household items when we decided to head toward the front of the store to check out some of the smaller appliances on display. We were walking past the checkout lanes when this guy came barreling past us with his phone pressed to his ear. He suddenly shouted at us to screw off, even though we hadn't done anything to him. My boyfriend's friend and I looked at each other with raised eyebrows. The guy kept walking while still talking loudly into his phone and gesturing wildly with his free hand. My boyfriend's friend asked if the guy had just told us to screw off. I said I thought he was probably on a phone call and wasn't even talking to us. We both started laughing because it was such a random thing to happen. Just one of those weird moments you get when you're out in public. My boyfriend shook his head at us for finding it funny, but even he was smiling. We made our way across the store to look at the small kitchen appliances. I was comparing two different toaster ovens when I noticed someone approaching us. It was the same guy from before, and he looked absolutely furious. Up close, he was honestly pretty intimidating. Probably in his 40s with wild hair and this intense stare that made it seem like he hadn't slept in days. He had on a leather jacket and boots, and everything about him screamed trouble. The guy started yelling at us, asking who we thought we were to laugh at him. He told us to screw off and called us jerks. He seemed to think we worked at the store. My boyfriend's friend tried to calm him down by asking what his problem was. He explained that we didn't work there and were just shopping like everyone else. The guy kept going with his rant, using language that was getting more and more aggressive. Other shoppers were starting to notice and give us a wide berth. I tried to explain that he was mistaken and that we weren't laughing at him. I told him we didn't work at the store and were just shopping. The guy then told me I needed to shut up, using a really nasty word to describe me. I felt my temper flare. I'm used to dealing with difficult customers at the diner where I work nights, but this was completely out of line. My boyfriend started to step forward, but I was already fired up. I told him to run along like a little man. I knew it was insulting when I said it. That was exactly what I was going for. This guy was acting like a complete psycho over absolutely nothing, and I wanted him to know how ridiculous he looked. The guy got even more angry and told me to shut up, using an even worse word than before. His voice got really loud and threatening. Both my boyfriend and I stepped forward, but his friend quickly moved in front of me. I think he could tell this situation was about to get really bad. What happened next was so fast and so completely insane. The guy just suddenly launched himself forward and head-butted my boyfriend's friend right in the nose. There was this horrible crunching sound, and blood immediately started pouring down his face. My boyfriend's friend didn't even fall down, which was amazing considering how hard he got hit. But my boyfriend immediately lunged toward the guy to stop him from doing anything else. Being only 5 feet tall, there wasn't much I could do except yell for help. The crazy guy took off running toward the exit like his pants were on fire. Some customer who had been watching the whole thing unfold ran over to help us and called the police on his cell phone. Store employees came rushing over with paper towels and a first aid kit. My boyfriend's friend was trying to downplay how bad it was, but his nose was clearly broken and he was bleeding all over his shirt. The police showed up pretty quickly and got our statements. They also talked to the customer who witnessed everything and reviewed the security footage. This wasn't the first time this guy had caused problems in the area. They told us he was probably on drugs based on his behavior. I drove my boyfriend's friend to the emergency room while my boyfriend dealt with the police paperwork. The whole ride there, I kept apologizing for making the situation worse, was my comment. My boyfriend's friend told me not to blame myself. He said that guy was looking for a fight no matter what and would have found some reason to go off anyway, but I still felt terrible. I paid for his pain medication and took care of the insurance copay. It was the least I could do after my smart mouth helped escalate things. The guy got arrested later that day when police found him at a gas station a few miles away. He ended up getting charged with assault and had to pay restitution for the medical bills. My boyfriend's friend had to wear a nose splint for 6 weeks, but he healed up fine. He still jokes about it sometimes, calling it his battle scar from the Great Toaster Oven incident. I joined the Air Force right out of high school because I needed structure and direction in my life. My parents weren't exactly the supportive type, and college felt like an impossible dream with our family's financial situation. The military offered me a chance to learn skills, serve my country, and maybe figure out who I was supposed to be. After basic training, I got assigned as an enlisted clerk. I ended up working in our unit's orderly room and mail room, basically the main administrative hub where all the paperwork flowed through. Most days I was the only full-time worker there, and when my supervisor got transferred, I became the temporary supervisor too. The thing is, I actually loved the work. I know that sounds weird, but there's something satisfying about keeping everything organized and making sure things run smoothly. I developed this system where I'd get documents processed way ahead of their actual deadlines. Like we'd have something due in 8 weeks, and I'd have it done in 2. It made everyone's lives easier, and it felt good to be the person people could count on. I was also going through some personal stuff during this time. I'd only been open about being gay for about 6 months, and in the military back then, that was still a pretty big deal. I was in this phase where I felt like I had to prove myself constantly, show everyone that I was tough enough to handle anything without running to human resources for help. So there I was, 22 years old, managing an entire administrative office, staying late most nights to make sure everything was perfect, and generally trying to be the most reliable person in the building. Then one day, this officer came walking into the office. He was middle management, the kind of guy who thought his rank made him more important than he actually was. He'd been waiting for a particular document, and apparently it wasn't moving fast enough for his liking. The thing was, the document had been sitting on his boss's desk for approval. I'd sent it up the chain weeks ago, but his superior was taking his time with signatures. It was still well within the official deadline, just not fast enough for what these things usually take. But he didn't want to hear any of that. He walked right up to my desk in the middle of the open office and started yelling. He demanded to know what I'd been doing all this time and told me that the document was obviously time sensitive. Then he asked if I was really that terrible at my job that I couldn't get things done in proper time frames. The entire floor went quiet. I mean, dead silent. Everyone was staring. I tried to apologize and explain that the document was actually with his supervisor for final approval. I started to walk him through the timeline, but he cut me off before I could finish. He told me to just get things done on time and called me a stupid idiot using some very colorful language. I'm not gonna lie, that stung. Here I was, busting my tail every day to keep things running perfectly, and this guy was calling me incompetent in front of the entire office. I apologized again and told him it wouldn't happen again. But here's what he didn't know about me. First, I was already processing everything weeks or even months ahead of schedule. Second, when someone disrespects me publicly like that, I can be incredibly petty. So I decided to teach him a lesson about timelines. From that day forward, everything with his name on it got processed exactly according to the official deadlines, not a day earlier. If something had an 8-week processing window, it sat on my desk for exactly 8 weeks. If it had a 4-week deadline, he'd get it on day 28. My boss knew exactly what happened because the whole office heard it. When I explained my new approach to processing his paperwork, my boss just smiled and told me to carry on. For the next few weeks, this officer kept coming by to check on various documents. He'd ask about personnel transfer requests, equipment forms, and other paperwork. Every time I'd give him the same response. I'd tell him I was tracking the progress and that it had however many weeks left to be processed, so it wasn't a priority right now. His frustration was obvious, but what could he say? Everything was being handled according to regulation. Then one day, I was out doing the mail run, delivering paperwork to all the other offices, when I overheard a conversation that made my whole week. I was walking past his office when I heard another officer talking to him. The other officer mentioned that his work had been really quiet lately and asked what was happening. The problem officer said he didn't know, but every time he followed up on something, I just told him it wasn't a priority. The other officer seemed surprised and pointed out that I usually got things done instantly for everyone else. Then he asked if the problem officer had been talking to me a couple of weeks ago. When the problem officer admitted he had, the other officer just said he was screwed. I had to keep walking, but I was grinning the entire rest of the mail run. About a week after that conversation, he came to my desk to follow up on yet another document. I gave him my usual response about processing windows and priorities. Then something happened that I honestly wasn't expecting. He apologized to me. He said he was sorry for how he treated me and admitted that he'd been out of line. I studied his face for a moment. He actually seemed genuine. I told him I accepted his apology, but asked him to wait before leaving. I started pulling paperwork out of my filing tray, handing him documents one at a time. I explained what each one needed. Some required his signature, others needed decisions about which department to send them to, some needed his review and approval, and others required his input before moving to the next stage. I kept going, stacking paper after paper in his arms. His eyes got wider with each document. I continued explaining that some needed to be forwarded to his supervisor, others required coordination with the logistics department, and the final ones just needed his signature to close out cases. By the time I was done, he was holding a stack of paperwork about 3 inches thick. See, here's the thing he didn't realize about me. Even though I was being petty with his timeline, I take my job seriously. I wasn't going to let other people in the office suffer because he was a jerk. So while I was making him wait for everything, I was still doing all the work. I just wasn't giving it to him. He asked if all of this had been ready the whole time. I told him that everything had been ready for weeks and I was just following proper processing timelines like he'd requested. Over the next week, I had several higher-ranking officers come by to congratulate me on how I'd handled the situation. Apparently, everyone had heard what happened, and they were all prepared to back me up if I decided to file a formal complaint. When they found out what I'd actually done instead, they were even more impressed. The whole thing changed my reputation around the base. Word spread about the clerk who could make your life easy or difficult depending on how you treated him. New officers were warned by the veteran staff to always be respectful when dealing with me. The officer who started it all treated me like royalty for the rest of my time there. Always polite, always respectful, always grateful for any help I provided. I never really warmed up to him personally after that incident, but our professional relationship became much smoother. I've been going to Clearwater Lake since I was about 6 years old. It's this perfect little spot about 20 minutes from town where the water stays cool even on the hottest days, and there's this rope swing that's been there forever. My dad used to bring me and my younger brother there when we were kids, teaching us how to swim and skip stones. Now that I'm 17 and my brother's 14, we pretty much have free reign to go whenever we want during summer break. That day in July was brutal. The kind of heat that makes the asphalt shimmer and your car's steering wheel too hot to touch. Me and 4 of my friends had been planning this lake trip all week, and my brother begged to come along. Usually I'd tell him to find his own friends, but the poor kid had been stuck inside playing video games for 3 days straight because of the heat wave. We got to the lake around 12 p.m. with a cooler full of sandwiches and sodas. The place was busier than usual, which made sense given the temperature. Families had claimed most of the good spots under the trees, but we found a decent area near the old dock where we could jump in and still have room to spread out our towels. My brother was having the time of his life. He'd always been the more cautious one between us, but something about being included with the older kids made him bold. He was doing cannonballs off the dock and actually managing to keep up with our conversations without being annoying about it. We'd been there maybe an hour when this woman showed up with two boys who looked to be around 8 and 10. She was one of those people who takes up space without caring about anyone else. Instead of finding an empty spot, she walked right over to an area about 30 feet from us and started spreading out this massive blanket, even though there was clearly a family stuff already there. The family that had been there packed up pretty quickly after she arrived. I couldn't hear what she said to them, but their body language said everything. The dad kept shaking his head, and the mom was gathering their things faster than necessary. The woman loudly announced that she'd finally found some decent shade and told her boys to go find sticks or something to play with. The kids immediately started running around, and at first it seemed harmless enough. They were just being loud and energetic like kids usually are. But then they discovered the rocky area near the shoreline, and that's when things got interesting. My friend Dean was floating on his back, eyes closed, completely relaxed. That's when the first rock hit him right in the shoulder. He stood up in the water, confused and angry, looking around to see where it came from. We all turned to see the two boys about 20 yards away, giggling and picking up more rocks. I yelled at them to cut it out with the rocks. The older boy looked right at me and threw another one. This time it landed in the water right next to my friend Sarah, who jumped and let out a little scream. She asked if they were serious right now. I looked over at their mother, expecting her to step in and handle her kids. She was lying on her stomach reading some romance novel, completely oblivious to what was happening. I called out to her, telling her that her kids were throwing rocks at people. She looked up with this annoyed expression, like I was interrupting something important. She told me they were just playing and that it was a public lake. She suggested I try not being so sensitive. That response caught me off guard. I'd expected an apology, maybe a promise to get her kids under control. Instead, she went right back to her book like the conversation was over. My brother was standing waist deep in the water, closer to where the boys were throwing rocks. I was about to tell him to move away when I heard him yelp. The rock that hit him was bigger than the others. It caught him right above his left eyebrow, and the sound it made when it connected was sickening, like a baseball hitting a wooden bat, but duller. He stumbled backward in the water, and I could see blood starting to run down his face immediately. The cut was deep, deeper than any scrape or normal kid injury. This was the kind of wound that needed serious attention. I was in the water and next to him in seconds, pressing my t-shirt against the gash to try and stop the bleeding. I asked if he was okay and told him to look at me. He was dazed but conscious, blinking hard like he was trying to focus. He said it really hurt and asked if he was bleeding bad. The woman's kids had gone quiet when they saw the blood, but instead of running to get their mother or apologizing, they just stood there staring. I shouted at the woman that her kid had just split my brother's head open. Now she stood up, but she didn't look concerned. She looked irritated. She claimed it was obviously an accident, and that kids throw things because that's what they do. She suggested maybe we shouldn't have been swimming so close to where they were playing. My brother was bleeding from a head wound, and she was actually trying to make it our fault. Sarah asked if she was insane and pointed out that the kids were aiming at us. The woman demanded proof and said we couldn't just accuse children of deliberately hurting someone. She reminded us they were 8 and 10 years old. My friend Mike was already on his phone calling 911, but the woman kept arguing like this was some kind of minor disagreement, instead of a situation where someone needed medical attention. She said this was completely blown out of proportion and claimed head wounds always bleed more than they should. She said my brother was probably fine. That's when I heard the voice that made my heart rate slow down for the first time since my brother got hit. Someone asked what the problem was. I turned around and there was my dad in his sheriff's uniform walking across the sand toward us. He'd been patrolling the lake area because of increased activity during the heat wave, something I didn't even know was happening. The change in the woman's demeanor was instant and obvious. All that confidence and attitude disappeared the second she saw the badge. My dad asked me what happened to my brother, so I explained that her kids were throwing rocks at everyone, and one of them hit my brother in the head and cut him pretty bad. My dad knelt down next to my brother, examining the wound while keeping pressure on it with a clean towel from our bag. He said it needed stitches and that an ambulance was on the way. Then he stood up and looked directly at the woman. He told her he needed her to explain what happened. She tried to claim it was all a misunderstanding and that her boys were playing by the water when they accidentally threw a rock that hit my brother. She said it was completely unintentional. My dad asked if she was supervising her children while they were throwing rocks. She said she was nearby and that they were good kids who would never hurt anyone on purpose. That's when other people started speaking up. A couple who'd been sitting close by came over and told my dad they'd watched the whole thing. An older man said he'd seen the kids deliberately aiming at us and laughing when they made contact. He told my dad that those boys were absolutely targeting us teenagers and that when the first rock hit my friend in the water, they high-fived each other. The woman's face went white. She said that wasn't true and accused everyone of trying to cause trouble for her. My dad explained that he had multiple witnesses saying that her children were intentionally throwing rocks at other lake visitors, resulting in injury. He said that meant assault, and her failure to supervise them meant child endangerment. She asked if he was serious about child endangerment, calling it ridiculous and saying she was right there the whole time. My dad explained that being physically present wasn't the same as supervising, and that she'd allowed her children to engage in dangerous behavior that resulted in injury to another person. The paramedics arrived and started treating my brother's wound, 6 stitches and a mild concussion, but he was going to be fine. The woman kept trying to argue with my dad, saying it was all blown out of proportion, but he wasn't having any of it. My dad told her that she was under arrest for endangering the welfare of a child and assault in the 3rd degree. She actually started arguing about how unfair it was and how her ex-husband was going to be furious about having to come pick up the kids. She called the whole situation insane and said the kids didn't know what they were doing because they were children. My dad replied that was exactly why they needed proper supervision. Her ex-husband showed up about an hour later and looked absolutely mortified when my dad explained the situation. He apologized repeatedly and promised the boys would face serious trouble at home. The woman spent the night in county lockup and ended up pleading guilty to reduced charges a few weeks later. My brother still has a small scar above his eyebrow, but he likes to tell people he got it in an epic rock fight. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.